老师好，我是英语3的陈奕轩，49号。我要念的文本是《Adventures of Huckleberry Finn》，这是第一段的部分。Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Chapter 1. Notice: persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per G.G., Chief of Ordnance. Explanatory. In this book, a number of dialects are used, to wit, the Missouri Negro dialect, the extreme form of the backwoods southwestern dialect, the ordinary Pike County dialect, and 4 modified varieties of this last. The shadings have not been done in a haphazard fashion, or by guesswork, but painstakingly and with the trustworthy guidance and support of personal familiarity with the several forms of speech. I make this explanation for the reason that without it many readers would suppose that all these characters were trying to talk alike and not succeeding. The author. Chapter 1. Huckleberry Finn. Scene: the Mississippi Valley. Time: 40 to 50 years ago. You don't know about me, without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth, manly. There was things which he stretched, but manly he told the truth. That is nothing. I never seen anybody but lie one time or another. Without it was Aunt Polly, or the widow, or maybe Mary. Aunt Polly, Tom's Aunt Polly, she is, and Mary and the widow Douglas is all talked about in that book, which is mostly a true book, with some stretchers, as I said before. Now the way that the book winds up is this. Tom and me found the money that the robbers hid in the cave, and it made us rich. We got $6,000 apiece, all gold. It was an awful size of money when it was piled up. Well, Judge Thatcher, he took it and put it out at interest, and it fetched us $1 a day apiece all the year round, more than a body could tell what to do with. The widow Douglas, she took me for her thumb, and allowed she would civilize me. But it was rough living in the house all the time, considering how dismal, regular, and decent the widow was in all her ways. And so when I couldn't stand it no longer, I lit out. I got into my old rags and my sugar hog's hat again, and was free and satisfied. But Tom Sawyer, he hunted me up and said he was going to start a band of robbers, and I might join if I would go back to the widow and be respectable. So I went back. The widow, she cried over me and called me a poor lost lamb, and she called me a lot of other names too, but she never meant no harm by it. She put me in them new clothes again, and I couldn't do nothing but sweat and feel all cramped up. Well, then, the old thing commenced again. The widow rang a bell for supper, and you had to come to time. When you got to the table, you couldn't go right to eating, but you had to wait for the widow to tuck down her head and grumble a little over the victuals, though there weren't really anything the matter with them. That is, nothing, only everything was cooked by itself. In the barrel of odds and ends, it is different. Things gets mixed up, and the juice kind of swaps around, and the things go better. After supper, she got out her book and learned me about Moses and the bushwashers, and I was in a sweat to find out all about him. But by and by, she let it out that Moses had been dead a considerable long time, so then I didn't care no more about him, because I don't take no stock in dead people. Pretty soon I wanted to smoke, and asked the widow to let me, but she wouldn't. She said it was a mean practice and wasn't clean, and I must try to not to do it any more. That is just the way with some people. They get down on a thing when they don't know nothing about it. Here she was bothering about Moses, which was no kin to her, and no use to anybody, being gone, you see, yet finding a power of fault with me for doing a thing that had some good in it. And she took snuff too. Of course, that was all right, because she'd done it herself. Her sister, Miss Watson, a tolerable slim old maid, with goggles on, had just come to live with her, and took a set at me now with a spelling book. She worked me middling hard for about an hour, and then the widow made her ease up. I couldn't stood it much longer. Then for an hour it was deadly dull, and I was fidgety. Miss Watson would say, "Don't put your feet up there, Huckleberry, and don't scrunch up like that, Huckleberry. Sit up straight." And pretty soon she would say, "Don't gap and straight like that, Huckleberry. Why don't you try to behave?" Then she told me all about the bad place, and I said I wished I was there. She got mad then, but I didn't mean no harm. All I wanted was to go somewheres. All I wanted was a change. I weren't particular. She said it was weak to say what I said. Said she wouldn't say it for the whole world. She was going to live so as to go to the good place. Well, I couldn't see no advantage in going where she was going, so I made up my mind I wouldn't try for it. But I never say so, because it would only make trouble and wouldn't do no good. Now she had got a start, and she went on and told me all about the good place. She said all a body would have to do there was go to around all day long with a harp and sing forever and ever. So I didn't think much of it, but I never said so. I asked her if she reckoned Tom Sawyer would go there, and she said not by a considerable sight. I was glad about that, because I wanted him and me to be together. Miss Watson she kept pecking at me, and it got tiresome and lonesome. By and by they fetched the niggers in and had prayers, and then everybody was off to bed. I went up to my room with a piece of candle, and put it on the table. Then I sat down in a chair by the window and tried to think of something cheerful, but it weren't no use. I felt so lonesome I most wished I was dead. The stars were shining, and the leaves rustled in the woods ever so mournful, and I heard an owl, away off, wooing about somebody that was dead, and a whippoorwill and a dog crying about somebody that was going to die, and the wind was trying to whisper something to me, and I couldn't make out what it was, and so it made the cold shivers run over me. Then away out in the woods I heard that kind of a sound that a ghost makes when it wants to tell about something that's on its mind and can't make itself understood, and so can rest easy in its grave, and has to go about that way every night grieving. I got so downhearted and scared I did wish I had some company. Pretty soon a spider went crawling out my shoulder, and I flipped it off and it lit in the candle, and before I could budge it was all shivered up. I didn't need anybody to tell me that there was an awful bad sign and would fetch me some bad luck. So I was scared and most shook the clothes off me. I got up and turned around in my tracks 3 times and crossed my breast every time, and then I tied up a little lock of my hair with a thread to keep witches away. But I hadn't no confidence. You do that when you have lost a horseshoe that you've found, instead of nailing it up over the door. But I hadn't ever heard anybody say it was any way to keep off bad luck when you killed a spider. I sat down again, a shaking all over, and got out my pipe for a smoke, for the house was all as still as that now, and so the widow wouldn't know. Well, after a long time I heard the clock away off in the town to go boom, boom, boom 12 clicks, and all still again, stiller than ever. Pretty soon I heard a twig snap down in the dark amongst the trees. Something was a-stirring. I sat still and listened. Directly I could just barely hear a meow, meow down there. There was a good, say meow, meow, as soft as I could, and then I put out the lights and scrambled out of the window onto the shade. Then I slipped down to the ground and crawled in among the trees, and, sure enough, there was Tom Sawyer waiting for me. This is the end of the chapter 1. Chapter 2. We went tiptoeing along a path amongst the trees back toward the end of the widow's garden, stooping down so as the branches wouldn't scrape our heads. When we was passing by the kitchen, I fell over a root and made a noise. We crouched down and lay still. Miss Watson's big nigger named Jim was sitting in the kitchen door. We could see him pretty clear, because there was a light behind him. He got up and stretched his neck out about a minute, listening. Then he says, "Who da?" He listened some more. Then he come tiptoeing down and stood right between us. We could have touched him, nearly. Well, likely it was minutes and minutes that there weren't a sound. And we all there so close together. There was a place on my ankle that got to itching, but I doesn't scratch it, and then my ear began to itch, and next my back, right between my shoulders, seemed like I would die if I couldn't scratch. Well, I've noticed that thing plenty times since. If you are with the quality, or at a funeral, or trying to go to sleep when you ain't sleepy, if you are anywheres where it won't do for you to scratch, why you will itch all over in upwards of 1,000 places. Pretty soon Jim says, "Say, who is you? Where is you? Dog my cat if I didn't hear something. Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down here and listen till I hears it again." So he sat down on the ground between me and Tom. He leaned his back up against a tree and scratched his legs out till one of them most touched one of mine. My nose began to itch. It itched till the tears come into my eyes, but I doesn't scratch. Then it began to itch on the inside. Next I got to itching underneath. I didn't know how I was going to sit still. This miserableness went on as much as 6 or 7 minutes, but it seemed a sight longer than that. I was itching in 11 different places now. I reckon I couldn't stand it more a minute longer, but I set my teeth hard and got ready to try. Just then Jim began to breathe heavy. Next, he began to snore, and then I was pretty soon comfortable again. Tom, he made a sign to me, kind of a little noise with his mouth, and we went creeping away on our hands and knees. When we was 10 foot off, Tom whispered to me, and wanted to tie Jim to the tree for fun. But I said no. He might wake and make a disturbance, and then they would find out I weren't in. Then Tom said he hadn't got candles enough, and he would sleep in the kitchen and get some more. I didn't want him to try. I said Jim might wake up and come, but Tom wanted to risk it. So we slipped in there and got 3 candles, and Tom laid 5 cents on the table for pay. Then we got out, and I was in a sweat to get away. But nothing would do Tom but he must crawl to where Jim was, on his hands and knees, and place something on him. I waited, and it seemed a good while, Everything was so still and lonesome. As soon as Tom was back, we cut along the path, around the garden fence, and by fetched up on the steep top of the hill, the other side of the house. Tom said he slipped Jim's hat off his head and hung it on a limb right over him, and Jim stirred a little, but he didn't wake. Afterward, Jim said the witches bewitched him and put him in a trance, and rolled him all over the stage, and then set him under the trees again, and hung his hat on a limb to show who done it. And next time Jim told it, he said that they rolled him down to New Orleans, and after that, every time he told it, he spread it more and more, till by and by he said that they rolled him all over the world, and tired him most to death, and his back was all over saddle boils. Jim was monstrous proud about it, and he got so he wouldn't hardly notice the other niggers. Niggers would come miles to hear Jim tell about it, and he was more looked up to than any nigger in that country. Strange niggers would stand with their mouths open and look him all over, saying as he was a wonder. Niggers is always talking about witches in the dark by the kitchen fire, but whenever one was talking and letting on to know all about such things, Jim would happen in and say, what you know about witches, and that nigger was croaked up and had to take a back seat. Jim always kept that 5-cent piece round his neck with a string, and said it was a charm the devil gave to him with his own hands, and told him he could cure anybody with it and fetch witches whenever he wanted to just by saying something to it. But he never told what it was he said to it. Niggers would come from all around there and give Jim anything they had, just for a sight of that 5-cent piece, but they wouldn't touch it, because the devil had his hands on it. Jim was most ruined for a servant, because he got stuck up on account of having seen the devil and been ruled by witches. Well, when Tom and me got to the edge of the hilltop, we looked away down into a village and could see 3 or 4 lights twinkling, where there was sick folks, maybe. And then the stars over us was sparkling ever so fine, and down by the village was a river, a whole mile broad, and awful still and grand. We went down the hill and found Joe Harper and Ben Rogers, and 2 or 3 more of the boys, hid in the old 10-yard. So we unhitched a skiff and pulled down the river 2.5 miles to the big scar on the hillside, and went ashore. We went to a clump of bushes, and Tom made everybody swear to keep the secret, and then showed them a hole in the hill, right in the thickest parts of the bushes. Then we lit the candles and crawled in on our hands and knees. We went about 200 yards, and then the cave opened up. Tom poked about amongst the passages, and pretty soon dug under a wall where you wouldn't notice that there was a hole. We went along a narrow place and got into a kind of room, all damp and sweaty and cold, and there we stopped. Tom says, "Now we'll start this band of robbers and call it Tom Sawyer's Gang. Everybody that wants to join has got to take an oath and write his name in blood." Everybody was willing, so Tom got out a sheet of paper that he had wrote the oath on, and read it. He swore every boy to stick to the band, and never tell any of the secrets, and if anybody done anything to any boy in the band, whichever boy was ordered to kill that person and his family must do it, and he mustn't eat and he mustn't sleep till he had killed them and had a cross in their breast, which was the sign of the band. and nobody that didn't belong to the band could use that mark, and if he did he must be sued. And if he done it again he must be killed, and if anybody that belonged to the band told the secret he must have his throat cut, and then have his carcass burned up and the ashes gathered all around, and his name blotted off the list with blood and never mentioned again by the gang, but have a curse put on it and be forgot forever. Everybody said it was a real beautiful oath, and asked Tom if he got it out of his own head. He said some of it, but the rest was out of pirate books and robber books, and every gun that has high tone had it. Some thought it would be good to kill the families of boys that told the secrets. Tom said it was a good idea, so he took a pencil and wrote it in. Then Ben Rogers says, "Here's Huck Finn. He hadn't got no family. What you going to do about him?" "Well, hadn't he got a fat father?" says Tom Sawyer. "Yes, he's got a father, but you can never find him these days. He used to lay drunk with the hogs in the 10-yard, but he hadn't been seen in this part for a year or more." They talked it over, and they was going to rule me out, because they said every boy must have a family or somebody to kill, or else it wouldn't be fair and square for the others. Well, nobody could think of anything to do. Everybody was stumped and sat still. I was most ready to cry, but all at once I thought of a way, and so I offered them Miss Watson. They could kill her. Everybody said, "Oh, she'll do, that's all right, Huck can come in." Then they all stuck in a pin in their fingers to get blood to sign with, and I made my mark on the paper. "Now," says Ben Rogers, "what's the line of business of this gang?" "Nothing, only robbery and murder," Tom said. "But who are we going to rob? Houses or cattle or stuff? Stealing a cattle and such things and robbery. It's burglary," says Tom Sawyer. "We ain't burglars. That ain't no sort of style. We are highwaymen. We stop stages and carriages on the road with mags on and kill the people and take their watches and money." "Must we always kill the people?" "Oh, certainly. It's best. Some authorities think different, but mostly it's considered best to kill them, except some that you bring to the cave here and keep them till they're ransomed." "Ransomed? What's that?" "I don't know, but that's what they do. I've seen it in books, and so of course that's what we have got to do." "But how can we do it if we don't know what it is?" "Well, why, blame it all, we've got to do it. Don't I tell you it's in the books? Do you want to go to doing different from what's in the books and get things all muddled up?" "Oh, that's all very fine to say, Tom Sawyer, but how in the nation are these fellows going to be ransomed if we don't know how to do it to them? That's the thing I want to get at." "What do you reckon it is?" "Well, I don't know, but perhaps if we keep them till they're ransomed, it meant that we keep them till they're dead." "Now, that's something like." "That's all answer. Why couldn't you say that before? We'll keep them till they're ransomed to death. The bothersome that they will be too, eating up everything and always trying to get loose." "How you talk, Ben Rogers. How can they get loose when there's a guard over them, ready to shoot them down if they move a peg?" "A guard? Well, that is good. So somebody's got to set up all night and never get any sleep, just so as to watch them. I think that's foolish. Why can't a buddy take a club and ransom them as soon as they got there?" "Because it ain't in the book, so that's why. Now, Ben Rogers, do you want to do things regular, or don't you? That's the idea. Don't you reckon that the people that make the books knows what's the correct thing to do?" Do you reckon you can learn them anything? Not by a good deal. No, sir. We'll just go on and ransom them in a regular way. All right, I don't mind, but I say it's a fool way anyhow. Say, do we kill the women too? Well, Ben Rogers, if I was as ignorant as you, I wouldn't let on. Kill the women? No, nobody ever saw anything in the books like that. You fed them to the cave, and you're always as polite as pie to them. And by they fall in love with you, and never want to go home any more. Well, if that's the way, I'm agreed, but I don't take no stock in it. Mighty soon we'll have the cave so cluttered up with women and fellows waiting to be ransomed that there won't be no place for the robbers. But go ahead, I ain't got nothing to say. Little Tommy Barnes was asleep now, and when they waked him up he was scared and cried and said he wanted to go home to his mom, and he didn't want to be a robber any more. So they all made fun of him and called him Crybaby, and that made him mad, and he said he would go straight and tell all the secrets. But Tom gave him 5 cents to keep quiet, and said we would all go home and meet next week, and rob somebody and kill some people. Ben Rogers said he couldn't get out much, only Sundays, and so he wanted to begin next Sunday. But all the boys said it would be weak to do it on Sunday, and that settled the thing. They agreed to get together and fix a day as soon as they could, and then we elected Tom Sawyer first captain and Joe Hopper second captain of the gang, and so started home. I climbed up the shade and crept into my window just before day was breaking. My new clothes was all greased up and clear, and I was dog-tired. This is the end of chapter 2. Here begins chapter 3. Well, I got a good going over in the morning form old Miss Watson on account of my clothes, but the widow she didn't scold, but only cleaned off the grease and clay, and looked so sorry that I thought I would behave a while if I could. Then Miss Watson she took me in the closet and prayed, but nothing come of it. She told me to pray every day, and whatever I asked for, I would get it. But it weren't so. I tried it. Once I got a fish line, but no hooks. It weren't any good to me without hooks. I tried for the hooks 3 or 4 times, but somehow I couldn't make it work. By and by, one day, I asked Miss Watson to try for me, but she said I was a fool. She never told me why, and I couldn't make it out no way. I sat down one time back in the woods and had a long think about it. I says to myself, if a body can get anything that pray for, why don't Deacon Wing get back the money he lost on pork? Why can't the widow get back her silver snuff box that was stole? Why can't Miss Watson fed up? No, says I to myself. There ain't nothing in it. I went and told the widow about it, and she said the thing a body could get by praying for it was spiritual gifts. This was too many for me, but she told me what she meant. I must help other people, and do everything I could for other people, and look out for them all the time, and never think about myself. This was including Miss Watson, as I took it. I went out in the woods and turned it over in my mind a long time, but I couldn't see no advantage about it, except for the other people. So, at last I reckoned I wouldn't worry about it any more, but just let it go. Sometimes the widow would take me one side and talk about Providence in a way to make a body smell water. But maybe next day Miss Watson would take hold and knock it all down again. I judged I could see that there was 2 providences, and the poor chap would stand considerable show with the widow's providence. But if Miss Watson's got him there warn't no help for him any more. I thought it all out, and reckoned I would belong to the widow's if he wanted me. though I couldn't make out how he was going to be any better off than what he was before, seeing I was so ignorant and so kind of low down and ordinary. Pup, he hadn't been seen for more than a year, and that was comfortable for me. I didn't want to see him no more. He used to always well me when he was sober and could get his hands on me, though I used to take to the woods most of the time when he was around. Well, about this time he was found in the river drowned, about 12 miles about town, so people said they judged it was him anyway. Say this drowned man was just his size and was ragged, and had uncommon long hair which was all like Pup, but they couldn't make nothing out of the face, because it had been in the water so long it weren't much like a face at all. They said he was floating on his back in the water. They took him and buried him on the bank, but I wasn't comfortable long, because I happened to think of something. I knowed mighty well that a drowning man don't float on his back, but on his face. So I know then that it weren't Pop, but a woman dressed up in a man's clothes. So I was uncomfortable again. I judged the old man would turn up again by and by, though I wished he couldn't. We played rubber now and then about a month, and then I resigned. All the boys did. We hadn't robbed anybody, hadn't killed any people, but only just pretended. We used to hop out of the woods and go charging down on hog drivers and women in carts taking garden stuff to markets, but we never hid any of them. Tom Sawyer called the hogs eggnots, and he called the turnips and stuff jewelry, and we would go to the calf and pore over what we had done, and how many people we had killed and marked, but I couldn't see no profit in it. One time Tom sent a boy to run about town with a blazing stick, which he called a slogan, which was the sign for the gang to get together. And then he said he had got secret news by his spies that next day a whole parcel of Spanish merchants and rich Arabs was going to camp in Cave Hollow with 200 elephants, and 600 camels, and over 1,000 sumpter mules, all loaded down with diamonds. And they didn't have only a guard of 400 soldiers, and so we would lay in as he called it, and kill the lot and scoop the things. He said we must lick up our swords and guns and get ready. He never could go after even a turnip cart, but he must have the swords and guns all scored up for it, though they was only laths and broomsticks, and you might score at them till you rotted, and then they weren't worth a mouthful of ashes more than what they was before. I didn't believe we could lick such a crowd of Spaniards and Arabs, but I wanted to see the camels and elephants, so I was on hand next day, Saturday. And when we got the word, we rushed out of the woods and down the hill, but there weren't no Spaniards and Arabs, and there weren't no camels nor no elephants. It weren't anything but a Sunday school picnic, and only a premier class at that. We busted it up and chased the children up the hollow, but we never got anything but some dough-nuts and jam, though Ben Rogers got a rag doll, and Joe Harper got a hymn book and a tract, and then the teacher trudged in and made us drop everything in cuts. I didn't see no diamonds, and I told Tom Sawyer so. He said there was loads of them there anyway, and he said there was an Arab there too, and elephants and things. I said, why couldn't we see them then? He said if I weren't so ignorant, but had read a book called Don Quixote, I would know without asking. He said it was all done by enchantment. He said there was hundreds of soldiers there, and elephants and treasure, and so on. But we had enemies which he called magicians. and they had turned the whole thing into an infant Sunday at school. Just out of spite, I said, all right, then the thing for us to do was to go for the magicians. Tom Sawyer said I was a mom school. Why? Said he. A magician could call up a lot of genies, and that would hash you up like nothing before you could say Jack Robinson. They are as tall as a tree and as big around as a church. Well, I says, suppose we got some genies to help us. Can we lick the other wood crowd then? How you going to get them? I don't know. How do they get them? Why, they rub an old tin lamp or an iron ring, and then the genies come tearing in, with the thunder and lightning a-raping around and the smoke a-rolling, and everything they are told to do they up and do it. They don't think nothing of pulling a shot tower up by the roots, and building a Sunday school superintendent over the head with it, or any other man. Who makes them tear around so? Why? Whoever robs the lamp or the ring. They belong to whoever robs the lamp or the ring, and they've got to do whatever he says. If he tells them to build a palace 40 miles long out of diamonds, and fill it full of chewing gum, or whatever you want, and fetch an emperor's daughter from China for you to marry, they've got to do it, and they've got to do it before sun-up next morning too. And more, they've got to watch that palace around over the country wherever you want it, you understand. Well, says I think they are a pack of flatheads for not keeping the pilots themselves, instead of fooling them away like that. And what's more, if I was one of them, I would see a man in before I would drop my business and come to him for the rubbling of an old tin lamp. How you talk, Huck Finn. Why, you would have to come when he rubbed it, whether you wanted to or not. What? And as high as a tree and as big as a church. All right, then, I will come. But I will make that man climb the highest tree there was in the country. Shucks, it ain't no use to talk to you, Huck Finn. You don't seem to know anything, somehow. Perfect saphead. I thought all this over for 2 or 3 days, and I reckoned I would see if there was anything in it. I got an old tin lamp and an iron ring, and went out in the woods and rubbed till I sweat like an engine, calculating to build a palace and sell it. But it weren't no use. None of the genies come. So then I judged that all that stuff was only just one of Tom Sawyer's lies. I reckon he believed it in the Arabs and the elephants. But as for me, I think different. It had all the marks of a Sunday school. This is the end of the chapter 3.